All right, guys, so the question is, cut in before you roll or roll before you cut? And the answer to that is it depends. But if you're just going by a general rule, typically cut in before you roll is the right answer. However, it really doesn't make that much difference on some materials. The reason that they came up with that is because back in the old days, all they had was oil base. And when you do oil base, you cut in before you roll, because what happens is when you roll first, what happens is your roll paint gets on your wall, and then you go to do your cut in, and the roll paint's already starting to set up just a little bit. So what happens is your brush starts sticking to the wall when you're trying to cut in. So that was the reason that they always said cut in before you roll. If you're just wondering why they did that. What but with water-based paint, it's not always the best. It doesn't really make that much difference, especially some of the water-based enamels. Now this depends on a couple of things. Now you could get into a dark color, all right, and if it has a lot of tint in it, sometimes of course it'll be better if you cut in first, because what'll happen is around the edges of your work, where your edges are your work, you're going to have a difference in color. By the time it dries, the tint will roll over inside the paint, and it will give you some issues. So it doesn't really matter if you do cut in before you roll. Most colors, if it's a light color, if it's a dark color, typically cut in first and then roll, and then you'll have less problems with what we call flashing, which is where the edge of the paint, it's less noticeable when you do the cut in first. So that's why they still continue to use that as a normal theory. Now, when you're doing production work and you're doing, say, an off-white or a light color, it could be really faster to roll first. Now, the reason I'm going to say that is because typically, this is the thing. If you've learned how to brush the right way, okay, if you've learned how to brush the right way, I hope I'm in frame. I don't know if I am. Looks like I am. My head won't be, but that's all right. When you learn how to cut in, you're using a straight brush, not an angle tip, because you cut in this way, and you can use both sides of your brush. The other one, you're flipping it over, and you're using the pointed end, and it's pulling the paint off the wall. With this brush, you're always putting paint on the wall. When you do your cut in this way, okay, you go back across this way, your last stroke should be lightly like this. Okay, it's really hard to do that with an angle tip brush. With an angle tip brush, you're going to have to do that last stroke at an angle, and if you look at your brush, these bristles are longer than these ones are, so they're going to have a different pressure on the wall. So what you end up with a lot of times when you're using an angle tip instead of a straight brush is you'll see your brush mark in the wall. You won't get as good a coverage. So if you're using a flat brush, a lot of times you can get better coverage with a flat brush than you can with an angle. Okay, that's the reason I always say to use a flat brush. This is a wall brush. It says right on it, wall brush. If you look at the ones that are angle tip, every single one of them says sash tool. Are you painting sash or are you painting walls? If you're painting walls, you need to use a wall brush. That's what they're for. Okay, so if you're doing that the right way, the way I talk about in the videos, then you're going to cut it. You can cut in after, because you're going to roll. A lot of times your roll is not going to cover as good as your cut in. Your cut in typically covers better than your rolling. So if you roll first and then you cut in, you're giving that wall paint a chance to dry, and then you can go back and do your second coat rolling after you cut in. And that's how it can be faster to roll before you cut in some production situations. And that's what so as a rule of thumb, cut in before you roll. That's what all the old tests, the contractor's license tests are going to say. typically cut in before you roll because they're talking about oil base. With water base, the newer paints, you can do it either way, and it doesn't really make that much difference. And so, and you can, by rolling first, sometimes you can give that roll coat, the first coat, a chance to dry. And if you can cut in and cover it in one coat, then all you got to do is a second coat of roll and you're done. So that's why I say to do it that way. All right, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Just a little painting tip for today. I'll talk to you in the next one. Please like, share, and subscribe.